You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of ADHD BCE. Today's episode is a little different. Rather than heading back thousands of years into the past, we're only going to go back a decade or so to talk about, toxic academia and how university can be challenging for many. Neurodivergent people do struggle in education. I know I certainly did. School, I found concentration difficult. I struggled with organisation and deadlines and so on. And despite loving learning at university, because it was all about archaeology, which was my special interest, I often felt like I was out of place and I was somehow getting it all wrong, which I now know is classic imposter syndrome. And this followed me around for years. And I should probably cover this with the fact that I really did struggle at school. So at university, I had many hidden challenges with researching and writing essays and so on. So in many ways, my imposter syndrome was probably justified. But we should probably recognise that for some neurodivergent people, education can be an incredible opportunity and they do very well. Whereas others, it can be a source of stress, anxiety and self-doubt. Often it's both at the same time. Well, today's guest, so hopefully some of you listeners will remember Dr Andy Shuttleworth. Well, Andy has very generously agreed to share some of his personal experiences from his own education, from his own academic journey, experiences that affected his mental health and that he has largely kept private until now. So just to say, this episode isn't an attack on universities or academia. Many neurodivergent people thrive in higher education and make extraordinary contributions to their fields. And instead, this is an honest conversation about what it can feel like to move through education and through university and academic life when your brain works a little differently. So, Andy, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, George. It's a pleasure.
Well, Andy, let's start at the beginning. Can you talk us through your experiences of education before university? You know, what was learning like for you growing up?
Oh, it was great, I have to say. I grew up in a former mining town in the northwest, Greater Manchester, though we adamantly still refer to ourselves as being in Lancashire rather than Greater Manchester. Gives you an idea of some of the stubbornness of my hometown people, which is one of our traits. Yeah, had the benefit of a really good primary school, a really good welcoming high school. Learning for me was a joy, always was be, and I was supported by my family in that. My uncle specifically, he was a teacher. He always advocated education as the way out. In that sense, you know, you can expand your horizons, whatever situation you're in. A good education would be able to take you far. And going through primary and high school and then sixth form college was a joy. Sixth form was probably one of the hardest aspects at that time, because as anyone can tell you, your A levels to this day were the hardest exams I've ever done. And, you know, I've done first year, second year, third year, master's thesis and a PhD thesis. And hand on heart, I'll tell you my A-level chemistry exam was probably the hardest exam I've ever done in my life. But it was good. It was supportive. You know, you're in a class of no more than 30. By the time you're in the A-levels, you're in probably a class of 12 or 10. You have the support of your teachers who you get to know over the space of 5 years. They get to know your little nuances and quirks and how best you learn and adapt their teaching styles, or at least they did for me and the people within my class, which had a range of, I guess now we would call them neurodiverse behaviours, but in the 90s and early 2000s, those kind of terminologies weren't really used as to the context that they are now. But the teachers did an amazing job. I still know teachers and look back at teachers as inspirations for my academic days. My history teachers, Mr. Philpott and Mr. Dawson, for example, you know, taught me how to evaluate sources far better than any academic did in my PhD days. And I take those lessons constantly going forward. So pre-academia, it was good. It was supported. It was regimented, obviously, with the curriculum, but I thrived in that regimentation and found what I liked, found what I didn't like. Don't like languages, love science, love history. Geography I can take or leave, which is a bit weird for an archaeologist, I guess. But yeah, it was great. It was good. And I look back at it, I guess at the time, you kind of look like, oh my God, why am I here? I don't want to be in school. I want to be out, I'm so, but looking back now, more than 20 years, 30 years ago, it was truly a good time. I was with my friends, 8 hours a day in classes, sitting next to them, and teachers who wanted to be there, who wanted to teach and that kind of stuff, and had the means and the resources, and the lower class sizes a little bit, maybe compared to today, allowed them to adapt their teaching. But yeah, it was good. Those pre-academic days, it really instilled a sense of, I like this, I want to carry it on, I want to go further. And I think even from my days in high school, it dawned on me as like, I want to go further. I want to go beyond A level. I want to go beyond, a degree. I want to see what's out there and go as far as this journey can take me. Yeah, it was good.
That's great to hear, Andy. I mean, what a really positive experience. It was in complete contrast to my own. I was the opposite, actually. I really struggled in school, didn't fit in, I don't think get the support. Again, like you mentioned, in the 90s and late 90s, I suppose. For me, the ADHD and autism and so on, it wasn't truly recognised, or it wasn't catered for, let's say.
Yeah.
And yeah, I struggled to learn much at all at school. I mean, I know I did. I can read, I can write, and I can use my brain, but I probably learned a fraction of what I should have learned, and I fell out of education without any qualifications. So I had a very different journey to your own. And I think I got in through a couple of college courses and an access course, which then led to Liverpool University, where I eventually met you. But yeah, I'm just delighted to hear what a positive journey you had, Andy.
And that positive journey, I think, is truly a reflection of the teachers themselves. I just want to shout out to all of my old teachers if they're kind of listening here, because they didn't do it. Obviously, rote learning at that stage of education is the norm, really. Teach facts, teach whatever, but they taught those facts in interesting ways, whether it be the use of presentations, whether it be an assignment where we actually talk to our family to understand our family history and the biases of sort. They did it in such a variety of ways that it made it interesting. And so one and I commend my high school and my college for that, and I recognize, I hold my hand up, I was probably very lucky to be in a high school and an education environment, secondary and further education both, to have that diversity and have those teachers to do that. Not many can do that, especially with neurodiverse kind of behaviors where it might necessarily be constrained, or the resources, the funding isn't there, or the class sizes are too large, or the curriculum now doesn't do that. It's one of those things, a time and a place, and it just worked. It worked for me, and it worked for others.
Yeah, sure. Great to hear. And shout out to all the good teachers out there doing their job and inspiring people like yourselves to carry on with your natural ability and interests. So yeah, great stuff, Andy. And that kind of leads then, I suppose, to university and your academic life itself. How did you navigate undergrad, postgrad study, and eventually becoming Dr Andy Shuttleworth? And what impact did that journey have on your confidence and well-being and mental health? Because you sounded like your school and college set you up brilliantly.
Yeah, so it did, but I went through a reinvention when I came into undergrad, as I think most people do when they leave, that school environment and those people that they've known for the better part of 18 years, and you want to try and reinvent yourself a little bit, or at least be truer to yourself. And I did that in undergrad. I think the caveat to note, George, is that I never intended to become a doctor of archaeology. I actually wanted to become a medical doctor. I wanted to be a pathologist for my sins, but A-level chemistry actually just wiped that off the map. And so my intention was to do 3 years of a science degree and then apply for medical school afterwards, because you could do that. I think you can still do that, where if you get a science degree with a certain amount of credits, you can join as a second-year medical student or some such. And that was the plan. And I went into university with this kind of University of Central Lancashire, now the University of Lancashire. They've had a rebrand. Went into university with that mentality to find myself a little bit, to have a little bit of fun. I had a student loan that obviously I didn't realize had to last me the entire year, so it was pretty much gone by the end of the first term. I'll do that. I went there to to find myself and to learn myself and to get through the 3 years, really. It was kind of like a tick box, my undergrad, for me, because I was thinking of the next step ahead, which was, I think, a bit wrong of me and a disservice of me, because I probably could have got more out of my 3 years of undergrad than I did. But it all changed, I think, within the third week of my first year, where Jenny Robinson, she taught us Introduction to Bioanthropology and Human and Hominin Evolution. Neanderthals, skeletons, Australopithecus, Ergaster, that kind of stuff. And that was it. Medical school was gone. I didn't know this existed. And there was one, and to be fair, I've just praised my secondary and further education. They didn't tell me this existed. Other than, Indiana Jones, I didn't know archaeology was a subject that one could legitimately pursue. Nevertheless, bioanthropology or anything like that, we didn't really touch upon it. And so this was like, what is this? So my great benefit from the 3 years of undergrad was it opened that door. And it legitimately gave me a wider field of education. It combined my two loves of science, biology, and history, because that's essentially what archaeology is. That's what essentially bioanthropology is when you boil it down to its salts. And so, my secondary and further education didn't give me that. They were very much, here's science, here's history, here's geography and whatnot. And you go down those pathways. They didn't say you could actually mix them up and make lovely cocktails with them. And here I was with Jenny Robinson, and she was talking to me about Neanderthals 30,000 years ago and cave art and everything like that, and Homo erectus and Chilean hand axes. And I was just, oh my days. And it just, and I remember leaving that lecture, running to the departmental school office, because it was like the very last day where, you could choose your modules and change your modules. And I had loaded mine to be biology and chemistry, because obviously they would benefit me in medical school. And I switched them all, got rid of chemistry. Who needs chemistry? And went to biology and anthropology. And that was it. And 3 years that dove straight into it, and I had the support of Jenny, of Tal Simmons, and other members of staff. And those 3 years, I think, were kind of like playing catch up. I felt I had to play catch up, and I had to do well, because I had to do well for my family. There was a pressure on that to do well with my family, but to see where this could take me, to see what avenues there were out there, because at that point I didn't know about masters. I knew about a PhD, but I didn't know the stages to get there or what was needed, because I've been so dedicated to the medical kind of route. And so, I was playing this catch up for myself to try and learn as much as possible, so I could take it further, whilst also meeting in Preston, where UCLan is based, wonderful people who've remained lifelong friends. Not many have stayed in academia. Most have gone on into public or private kind of service, but it's that they've stayed very close friends throughout the years. I would say my educational journey truly began, though, when I came to Liverpool and I met you. I came for my master's and stayed on for my PhD. So my master's was 2007-2008, University of Liverpool. And I'll tell you this, George, I wouldn't have done a master's if it hadn't been for the European Capital of Culture. Because Liverpool...
Really?
Yeah, Liverpool was capital of culture at that time, and the University of Liverpool reduced all their tuition fees from £3,000 to £1,000, and that made it affordable for me.
I missed that boat. I was already there. I was already paying £3,000.
Yeah, so I was applying, and it's like, well, yeah, this master's benefits from the capital of culture. Something, it's now, instead of 3,000, it's 1,000. And I looked at the sums. I was like, well, if I get a bar job, if I get a cheap flat to rent, or I live with my folks for 6 months or whatever like that, I could pay that and have some form of a life as well, and get a master's degree out of it, an MSc. And that's what I did. And that was my awakening to academia. That's when I found a group of people, yourself amongst them, but other master's students, postgrads as well, who showed me I wasn't alone in wanting to know more, wanting to contribute more, and wanting to take this field that we love further. And it was great. It was lovely. And we had, I remember, you're in the pub and you joke about that quintessential academic images of like tweed jackets in a pub over a pint of ale, and you're talking about some nuanced thing. But that's what I did. That's what we did. And, we thought we were
It was great.
Yeah, it was great. And then it's one of those things, I look back and it's like, that brings a smile to my face, but it also makes me a bit embarrassed because oh, young Andy thought he knew so much when in fact he knew so little. It's like that kind of stuff. And we all did, but we all grew. And again, those people became friends. They're scattered throughout the world now. Some are working in France, in Africa. Some are based in the United States. Some are based throughout the UK, Europe. But it's, they still are in touch, and we still laugh about those times. That's when I found my love. That's when I found my passion, really, and got that sense of it. But that is also, I think, at the same time when the anxiety started, and knowing when it is, I had this passion. I wanted to keep it going, and the anxiety says that I've got to keep pace with these people. I've got to do the next thing. I've got to get a 70 on this. I've got to get a distinction if I want to do a PhD, those kind of things. I've got to make the right contacts within the department if I want to be a PhD here. I've got to go to a conference. Maybe I need to present a poster, those kind of things. That anxiety started to ramp up just as my joy had kind of encompassed me a little bit. That was the shadow to the joy, I guess. Yeah. And I didn't really understand it then, probably didn't even consciously acknowledge it then. It's only after years of looking back that I can point to it and say that's the point where this little thing started to grow and grow. But yeah, it was a wonderful time, the masters, good people, but it was probably the beginning of that anxiety of going in and realizing what you need to do to be successful in academia.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'll just drop in my own little bit there because when I first went to Liverpool, it was like a dream come true, really, because 2 years prior to that, I never thought I'd ever get to study archaeology or go to university or have a chance of becoming an archaeologist. So from my own perspective, it was just so exciting. It was people were telling me it's a red brick university and it's not a department, it's a school of archaeology. And it was just incredible for somebody like a little farm boy with no education to all of a sudden be there rubbing shoulders with kids who'd been through private school and got straight A's and were heading right to the top of whatever they wanted to do. And life seemed so easy for these guys. So yeah, I think from my perspective, I wonder if it's the same for you. I found that anxiety was there because from my personal point of view, academically, I struggled, completely ignorant. So yeah, the imposter syndrome, as I referenced earlier, started as I got there and grew as I realized. You listen to the other students who, I read Harry Potter when I was born.
Yeah.
I did do this, that, and the other. And
you don't know who Foucault is? How can you not know who Foucault is? The philosopher. I'm just like, this is the first time. I'm with you on the imposter because I went, so UCLan is a post-92 university. I didn't get into Oxford. I didn't get into Cambridge. I never applied really for the red bricks. I went always for the post-92s. That was my kind of ball house. So going from UCLan to the University of Liverpool was a massive step up for me, even though it was just down the road geographically, because it was a red brick. It was, a Russell Group university known for its research and its quality and its academia and that kind of thing. So I share, George, what you've experienced a little bit, but from slightly a different perspective, because I was going in, thinking, oh my God, I've come in from a post-92 and I'm going into this place and, what are they going to think? And that's when I did hear, and we just joked about it, that's what I did hear about Foucault and other philosophers and stuff. And I'm like, was I meant to read this? Who is this thing? What's going on? I know who Nietzsche is, but that's only from the historical context. I don't know who this other person is and that kind of stuff. And, it's this kind of thing that put me on the back foot and that, they contributed to that slightly imposter. Another thing really was my accent, because I have my accent now. But this accent that I have now was not the accent that I had when I started my master's, when I started my PhD. So it was a very typical, very, broad Mancunian Northwest accent. Hey up, love, how you doing? Kind of stuff. And I remember presenting in seminars and then doing a poster presentation of my master's in my first year of my PhD, and no one taking blind bit of notice of what I was saying. And it was not because necessarily the stuff that I was presenting was wrong, though it is obviously being at that level interpretive and people can disagree with your opinions and your interpretations. That's par for the course. But it was because of my accent. And it was because of like, okay, I don't speak King's English, Queen's English. I don't enunciate my vowels or that kind of thing. It's that kind of stuff. And it's, I might squish some words down a little bit because that's how we grew up in Leigh, and that's how we grew up in Greater Manchester. And that's why I'm a Lancashire lad and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it took me a while to change my accent, fit in.
And there you go, to fit in. This is where the crux of the matter is, because, I mean, many of us who didn't go to, weren't from the South, didn't have a public school upbringing, don't have a posh accent. So yeah, a classic education. What we try and do is adopt a BBC presenter voice just to try and fit in, don't we? And I certainly noticed that, I say people from the South as well a minute ago. I don't mean that, if you remember our mate Chris Andrews, who was a Tottenham fan, he would try and do a slightly more enunciated version of his voice when he was doing the presentation. And we also, not all, but a lot of us try and do that. And I think that it's a massive red flag if you think about it. We're going to have to come in and change who we are to fit into this environment. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Andy?
No, for sure. It's conformity. It's this, it's this age-old, like 18th, 19th century view of higher education, isn't it? Oh, we all need to be dons. We all need to be in robes and that kind of stuff. And we all need to speak and say things certain ways. And universities still have that kind of perception. I'm sure now, after 20 odd years of this, it's better than it was when we started. At least I hope so, given the knowledge that, of neurodiverse learning and the recognised importance of student voice as a metric in higher education statistics and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was very much, these are your boundaries. This is the box that you need to be in. If you're within it, great. The world is potentially your oyster. If you're outside of it, then you have a small opportunity to get in, and that could be changing your accent. That could be, finding the right people, that kind of stuff. But you need to be in, or else you're out. And that kind of in or out, I think, is a common trait throughout academia. It's definitely something I noticed as I went through the PhD and as I became an academic myself. Yeah. It all depends on if you're considered in or not, really. And those variables of what makes somebody in and what makes somebody out differ from place to place. I now work at, studied at Liverpool, worked a little bit at Liverpool. I've worked at Queen's University in Belfast. I've worked at the University of Staffordshire, did a stint at the University of Malta. Great place. And I spent most of my time at Durham. And I tell you what, if there's a box, Durham is it, because Durham has a lot of traditions and a lot of stuff that you would raise your eyebrows at. And students do struggle with the conformity at Durham of the tradition versus the modernity of what the real world is. It's a bit weird, but weird not in a, oh, that's a fascinating weird in a, should we really be having this in this day and age? Should we not be more open? Should we not be more diverse in our viewpoint, in our education, who we are open to? Yeah. It's that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably highlight the fact that Liverpool's a great university, and I have many positive experiences from there, and I know tons of people who've had a great time there as well. I think what we're talking about here generally, obviously we've got to talk about our experiences, and it happens to be Liverpool, but I think there's a bit of a higher education universal here where there's these sort of outdated elitist views and prejudice that linger in academia, certainly when we were still there. Worry is that it's still there and it's not going anywhere. And I suppose the question is why? For institutions that are allegedly there to investigate and create and grow, how can they seem so grounded in outdated traditions that make no sense outside of, where we're talking the last sort of 300 years, 400 years, longer than that? It's
that word though, isn't it, George? It's tradition. That's the thing. And it's, for years, for centuries, higher education was the pinnacle of a certain demographic, shall we say. And it's really only with Tony Blair's Labour government, in 1997 or the mid to late 90s, when they set that target of they want 50% of all young people to go to university. Now, we can argue the positives and negatives of that in relation to, the higher education funding and all the rest till kingdom come. That's a separate podcast in itself. But that opened the door for people like yourself, like me, like others, to actually go to university affordably and have this education and to pursue it to its highest point. But it didn't give the universities time to amend their traditions. And so they have kept to them as best they can. It could be a unique selling point for some of them. And you're right, Liverpool is a great university. Queen's is a great university. Durham's a great university. Staffordshire's a great university. I've had great experience with great students amongst them. But they are still embedded in this tradition of this old school metric. And I think that's a reflection because who's in charge there, not dissing on vice chancellors again. That's a different podcast. But it's the people who manage universities now came up through the university system prior to, say, the 50-50 Labour government kind of stuff. They were used to university being a certain way, and they've carried that on. Maybe in a generation or two, when maybe those who went to university through our generation come to those management areas and have a bit more knowledge and contextual understanding of the world and want to diversify these institutions better, we'll see change. I hope so. I saw that in Staffordshire, where I had several neurodiverse students talking about who were in my forensic archaeology and genocide investigation course. And, we adapted to those. We did a range of non-traditional learning activities, ranging from, the practical sessions to the actual going out and doing it, to more of less lectures, more discussions on aspects where people were free to say what they thought in a safe space and that kind of stuff, and to explain in their own words, in their own accents, what they felt about certain things. And, that was great. And obviously that benefited, students with dyslexia. I had one student in staffs who was only diagnosed with dyslexia when he was in that master's course. And it was astounding that was not diagnosed in his undergraduate or prior, but hey ho. And once that diagnosis came about, we could put in various different things and change the course, change the method of teaching accordingly, which was to his benefit. Universities are doing that on a scale, albeit slightly to medium scale, but I think once our generation comes into those areas of management, maybe we'll see more. And especially if we see more VCs or university management who aren't of the Oxbridge elite, shall we say, who have come through a post-92 route or who've come through other non-traditional education routes. We'll see a diversity of this. I hope so, because I think that's the only way education is going to survive, really. It cannot be this. There are some who will remain their traditions. Look at Oxford, look at Cambridge, look at Durham to an extent. Yes, of course, keep their traditions, but there are some where I think needs to be flexible. And I think Liverpool, Staffordshire, Queen's, others are at the prime where they can rebalance their traditions and be a lot more inclusive and considerate.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I was personally undiagnosed throughout education, so I only found out a few years ago. So for me, I don't know what accommodations could have been made, if I'm honest with you. But think about neurodivergent students now, 18 years old, or mature students coming a little later in life. Mm-hmm. Do you think academia still misunderstands a lot about neurodivergent people or about students with learning differences? And what kind of changes would help them? And same for the researchers further up the academic ladder. How could these guys thrive without feeling that they need to hide their difficulties or the differences and try and prove that they belong in this place of esoteric clandestine knowledge?
Let's start with the recognition that some neurodiverse people will probably benefit from that esoteric kind of structure and go on very high. I know several professors who boom straight in who are like that, and that's good because that esotericism works for their neurodiversity. Let's start with the students, because I think it has changed. Because, when I was an undergrad, maybe the same for you at Liverpool, the only kind of options for, if you were struggling with work were maybe a token student support discussion, an extension request you could have put in where you had to provide evidence. Now you have universities, as every institution has, a lot stronger recognition of the need for student support and a recognition of neurodiverse behaviors within the full spectrum of that kind of range. You have a range of academic kind of considerations from concessions, for example. So if you have dyslexia, you can have 20 minutes extra on exam, an hour extra on exam. You can take an exam if, for example, you are particularly sensitive to sound. You can book a concession room for an exam, so you can take that exam on your own. And there is a recognition amongst HEIs work to provide those for the benefit of their students. So I think things have come a distinctly long way for those with neurodiverse behaviours, where there are now ways to facilitate and help those students' learning journeys going forward. And that is an amazing thing. That is good.
Yeah.
I think that's come in a method of what works, what doesn't, and seeing what works, what doesn't. I do think there's still a long way to go with that, because I think my personal opinion is we still focus on like the core neurodiversity kind of areas rather than representing the entire spectrum of what they are, because obviously one solution for someone with a certain form of autism is not, or ADHD is not going to work for another individual with maybe that diagnosis because of the slightly different or nuanced of the individual for it. But I think the appropriate way is to look for the majority, what works for majority, and then see what we're missing, what's going through the net. And universities are doing that. Durham's doing that. Staffs did that. Liverpool will most likely be doing that too. Now, probably didn't do it when we were undergrads. I can't recall at UCLan such kind of things. But again, we're talking about early 2000s. Neurodiversity was only just becoming an aware thing at that point. So universities had to play catch up. That's for students. So I think big steps have come for a student. And you could go to any listener or yourself, George, when you've got kids, when you go to university, go to the open days and ask about this, and they will give you all of the literature about how they all the support, because they've done a lot. They've done a lot coming from it. And that kind of leads me, why they've done a lot is because some of their staff are neurodiverse themselves and don't want their students to go through the same things that they went through, and the same struggles that they didn't go through. Some neurodiverse staff thrive on the esoteric nature of higher education. Perfect, great. Others don't, feel isolated, whatever. Others like the isolation of just focusing on one thing and going for it, that kind of stuff. There's a diversity of it. And as staff going through, it's probably better than it was, I hope so at least, but it's probably not made the same strides they have with the students, simply because the students pay. And they're the customer, right? So that you have to accommodate them, and you have to show that you're doing that, and actually not just show it, but actually follow up on it as well. Where staff, I still think, probably still find some struggles, but because, say, if you're an academic, you're the front line of staff for your students, you can advocate for more change and actually incorporate that change into your teaching, into your research, and into your project work or group work or seminars or tutorials or however you teach, to make it just that little bit easier for some of those students, at the same time making it easy for you to do your job as well. So I think it is better than it was like 20 years ago. I truly do, which means that in another 20 years it's going to be better still.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, like when your kids go to university, if that is a path that they want to go down, because after all, university has worked for me. It has been beneficial for you, but it's not for everyone. I acknowledge that, just like if you were to give me the tools of an electrician, I would probably kill myself within 5 seconds because it is just not for me. I'm not a practical, physical person. I can't do that. There's nothing wrong in saying that. What's wrong is that the government do not provide, or society does not provide, the equal opportunities for different pathways that higher education provides in terms of supposedly higher paying jobs and all the rest. But again, another podcast. It's all this, that, and the other. And it's all that. It's better than it was 20 years ago. In 20 years, when your kids or whatever, when they go to university, it may be better still, which is going to be great for them if they have neurodiverse traits, or for anyone who's listening who's got like a 3-year-old now, and in 15 years' time they're going to go to university. It's going to be better for them going forward as well. That's something to look forward to. It's just universities are slow to change because they have this mentality, this tradition, like you said, of, well, we've always done it this way. And it takes not necessarily a crisis, but it takes a bump for them to realign a little bit, because they're embedded within their traditions.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit like greater society, really, isn't it? It's the structures that are there. Of course, they're going to take time to change. And
say, I would probably argue that universities are probably changing faster, even though it's probably not to the speed that you or I or others may appreciate or want, but they're probably changing faster than, say, private enterprise or, other such things, or the civil service or that kind of thing, because, we have probably a greater number of neurodiverse individuals, maybe within academic staff, definitely within our students on a day-to-day. Our community is probably proportionately, significantly neurodiverse in some way, shape or form. And we have to accommodate it. We have to acknowledge it so that they can get the best out of their journey and become who they want to be.
Yeah, this is the other thing. I mean, one of the main reasons I do this podcast is so that neurodivergent listeners can get a sense of perspective of the deep evolution behind their genetics, and how indispensable neurodivergent people have been throughout prehistory and history. And of course, right now, today, you mentioned all these people in university. Well, we're trying to enable these guys. You know, we are amongst the most creative, impatient, brilliant people on the planet. You know, if we want change, and my ADHD wants the space age now. I don't want to see all these wars and nonsense. I want a utopia. I want us to create a better world, and there's only one way to get that, and that's to keep investigating, keep banging the drum, keep advocating and understanding and embracing and growing together. So, yeah, I think we could go on about this forever, but I really, I'm sort of conscious of time, and I really want to give you the opportunity to talk about your academic journey, Andy, because you represent lots of other people who've been through very similar experiences. I mean, I remember, when I used to go on digs out in Turkey, I got to spend a lot of time with people further up the academic ladder, professors, doctors, PhD students, master's students. And if there's one thing that was prevalent throughout, it was stress and pressure. Yeah. And I'd love to hear about your journey from master's to PhD and what impact that's had on you.
The one thing that wasn't told to me, but I have subsequently told to all of my PhD students when I was in academia, and I've told to others who have gone on to an academic journey or starting their academic journey, is from the beginning of your academic journey, from nursery school through primary school, through high school, through college or sixth form, through undergrad, through master's, through PhD, there is always a next step. There is always a natural progression, right? You do one, you move on to the next, and it's a higher step, and so on and so forth. What no one tells you, or at least no one told me for a PhD, is that there is no next step after that. There is no guaranteed next step after that. It is a drop, potentially. There's a gap between you finish your PhD and maybe a postdoc or a career or a teaching post or whatever, or there's a plummet and a fall. That is what people need to understand with academia. It's not guaranteed. You get your PhD, you get some names after your name, you get called doctor, which is grand for the mailman delivering the mail, that kind of stuff. But there's no natural progression after a PhD. There's no guarantee of it. And that's what I struggled with. And during the stress of the PhD, you start your first year and it's all grand. You're a PhD student. You're doing this and it's lovely. It's great. You're researching this one specific niche and it's amazing. But year 2 comes in, year 3 comes in, and the stress ramps up because you're getting close to that jump. You're getting close to that drop-off point, and you don't know what is next. Is it a postdoc? Well, they are very hard to get by these days. That depends on mostly not necessarily what you know, but who you know. The money to put in for funding application is very stressful, and that takes you away from your PhD research. So you're stressed about applying for money for a postdoc, but then you become doubly stressed because you're not investing that time into writing up your PhD and your results and your thesis and that kind of stuff. Maybe you're teaching as well. So you're combined that with a workload to make sure that your own students, undergrad students, get the necessary feedback that you want to give them, that they deserve. And that can be quite stressful. All coming to a point of divide, your little kind of assessment, shall we say, of your overall PhD thesis. And you find yourself at a loss of what to do. I was lucky. Hand on heart, I was very fortunate. I got my PhD. I still had a little university lecture gig at Liverpool. And then I interviewed and was offered a teaching fellowship at Durham. But that is rare now. No one is going to go into straight after their PhD into a truly academic lecturing role. You could have years as a postdoc if you're lucky. On essentially fixed term contracts, not getting raises, not getting pay increases, that kind of thing. Obviously working in your field, and that is amazing, but, not getting that security because a postdoc is 2-3 years, maybe. The rare ones could be 5 years. And normally it used to be you do your PhD, you get a postdoc, and then you get an academic job. That's gone now. And that's not the way. I have friends and colleagues who got their PhDs the same time as mine. They waited 5 years for a postdoc. They got a postdoc for 2 years. they waited another 2 years for another postdoc, it's that kind of stuff. And in the meantime, they did other roles, other jobs outside of academia or academia adjacent. And it's just so anxiety raising, because you know what your calling is, what you want to do, you can contribute, not to be egotistical, but this is what you want to do, and you can't do it.
Yeah, you followed your interests, your passions, and you're not necessarily, I'm sure there's the odd person out there who's trying to do it so that they can be a doctor or a professor, but I suspect that the workload involved sheds those people off, because you're going to need that sort of magnetic interest in what you're doing. But yeah, it's incredible to think that you're doing all this for so many years, the culmination of all that passion and desire and effort, and of course the stress of it all, and then you just run out of runway.
You run out of runway, and it goes in, and you don't know what, and it's a fall, and again, no one else did. If you've got a good relationship with your PhD supervisor, I had a decent relationship with my PhD supervisor. Maybe not the best of the best. He had better relationships with other of his supervisees, but I had a good one. But once you've gone past that viva, once you've submitted, that's it. If you've got a good relationship, they may support you for a little bit, but they're not going to support you forever. That's eventually going to end. Sometimes that support ends because they've got other PhD students, to go on. And, during the last probably year of my PhD, my write-up before my viva, that's probably when my anxiety, my stress, my depression probably kicked into a distinct notch, because you've got all of that, what I've just described, but you're then also competing with the other PhD people in the same boat for the same resources. So I was very conscious, if I was to apply for a departmental grant, I would be competing with my friends for that. That's not a good place to do. They're competing with me, and it becomes cutthroat. And if I got it, I'm like, great, that's great. That allows me to do this for 6 months, but they may dislike me because it prevents them from doing whatever they wanted to do for 6 months. And vice versa. If they got it, I would be very jealous to say, I wanted that. I needed that to pay rent or to do whatever, and I didn't get it. That kind of stuff. And you're all doing this. And when I remember doing my viva, passing with minor corrections, finishing it and submitting it, and the attitude changes, or at least it did with me. It could be just because I'm, an arse, really, maybe, but it changed because I was no longer part of that group anymore. I wasn't a PhD student. I got my PhD. I was no longer in that group. I felt very alone. Friends who I shared an office with, acted differently towards me. I was now, on my own, competing against them for jobs, that kind of stuff. And then when I got one, that, for those who didn't, some of them stopped talking to me, and it was only years later that we reconnected. Some of them gave me support, but it was, some of it was genuine. Some of them might have been tinged with something else. And it's that kind of stress, that competition that academia puts it in. And that doesn't end when you've just finished your PhD. That carries on, because when you're in an academic department, again, you're still applying for the same pots of money against your colleagues who become your friends. You're still, applying for the same resources within your department against them, to try and promote yourself, and your career trajectory, or you want to become, go from an assistant professor to an associate professor or whatever. You're competing for that promotion against your colleagues, your friends, which creates animosity. It is pitted from an academic perspective in some ways to be against people, that you were against people, and it's not healthy. It's not good. And I had good friends who sadly I don't really talk to anymore because of a combination of my actions, their actions, but within this sphere of academia of competing against each other, I just don't talk to anymore. I've lost relationships, like not just friendships, but romantic relationships, because of the anxiety and the stress and the depression that's caused by all of this. I wrote a blog post when blogs were a thing back in the early mid-2000 teens about my post-PhD like mental health stuff, and it was basically just me venting outwards, like I didn't want it to hold in. And the amount of comments from professors, from people I respected, who said, I went through the same thing, I went through the same thing, I went through the same thing. And I was like, why did nobody tell me? Why is this not a part of the support network of this. Why do we have to go through this alone? Just because you went through it alone does not mean the next generation has to go through it alone. And it is amazing because I'd just broken up with a partner. I thought it was, it was all because of various different things, but I was like, oh my God, I don't have a career in front of me. I don't know what's happening. I've just broken up with a partner, that kind of stuff. Here's this professor going, yeah, I bet the unofficial statistic is that if you're with a person during a PhD, you're 80% likely not to be with them when you finish it because the stress of the PhD will just destroy it, destroy that relationship. Yeah. It's like, I would really have liked to have known that. I would have liked to have known the stress that comes in. I would like to know that I was not alone in this very small boat that I thought I was alone in.
Yeah.
But no one talks about it. No one did.
No, if you don't know, you don't hate the player, hate the game, as the saying goes. I was always confused by the levels of toxicity amongst supposed friends who were, as soon as you got, undergrad was different. But I noticed with friends who were further up the academic ladder, they were, I thought good people, to be honest, but tainted by the system. They were people who got on, but you could tell. I would say they were duplicitous, but there was definitely backstabbing. There was definitely slagging off and whatnot. And you could tell there was a sort of competitor to it that was justifying all this behaviour. So it was really interesting to hear all that, Andy, because I felt at the time, because of course, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But at the time, I always felt so out of my depth and like I couldn't handle it. So for me, the thought, I struggled academically and I wasn't aware of my learning differences, and there certainly wasn't any offer of support for anybody who didn't do it perfectly first time. So I didn't even consider going further down the line. I kind of killed, I'm not saying Liverpool University, but academia and the structure of it wrote off any opportunities that I might have had or wanted to have to chase a career in archaeology. I think I'd have been a good teacher. I think I may have been a good lecturer. I think I may have contributed to archaeology.
You would have been an amazing educator, George. Your perspective, your journey, you would have made a great educator, regardless of what level you would have educated at. You would have been great. It's the people you can see it in, and I've taught hundreds of students, and you can see, right, you're going to be a good educator, you're going to be a good researcher, you're not going to do this at all, you're going to do something else, and this kind of stuff. You just need a little bit of support to get you up to reach your potential. I've seen it, others have seen it, and that's when academia works, right, when you support that kind of stuff. But a lot of it is it's not support, and it's like you said, there are, and someone listening to this might be like, well, every career, every sector has politics, every workplace has politics. That's true, and that is true, but there seems to be a lot more political, a lot more aspect to it in academia, because even just the association of being with one person or one professor will bar you from a whole other research area or research group, which has detrimental aspects to your career and to your progression, and obviously increases your stress. Plus also the fact that these days, when it came to me, I was an academic for the better part of 10 years after post-PhD, but I never had a permanent academic contract. I was always on fixed term. The longest fixed term contract I had was 3 years at Durham from 2014 to 2017. It took me over 3 and a bit academic years or so. Then I had 2 years at Queen's, 18 months at Staffs. And each time was like, oh yeah, we'll make you permanent next year. We'll make you permanent next year. But you can't settle down roots. You can't have a family, that kind of stuff. If you think in 18 months, I might be moving across the country, or indeed, because it's academia, across the world. How can you create a stable life of friendships, of support, if you're looking over your shoulder to say, well, my contract could end in a month, that kind of stuff. And then, you reach a point where, because, you get your 6 months notice to say your contract is not going to be renewed. And you're just like, oh, well, okay, start looking for jobs, which is an added stress because upon the work that you're already doing. And then typically it's one of those things where it's like a month, or in one of my cases, a week before my contract ends, you just have the head of department pop their head in and go, oh, by the way, we've renewed your contract for another year. and just like, wow, that would have, because I've got like 3 interviews, or that kind of stuff. At best I've got interviews for the academic roles. At worst I've got nothing, and I'm like, thank you, that kind of stuff. But it's like, it comes across like, oh, we're doing you a favor, we're extending it for another year. It's like, dude, it shouldn't be like that. It should be because of my contributions, my merit, that kind of stuff. And at least tell me more than a week or more than a month before I'm potentially leaving this institution to say that this was even a possibility, let alone that it's guaranteed. And that just adds the stress. That it makes this stress as its baseline. A level of stress and anxiety is always baseline, which after 10 years and no permanent job in sight, I just had to ask myself, is this how I wanted to live? If I wanted a stable family, if I wanted a social life, if I wanted to be a good friend, a good son, just a good person, really, and this didn't come out of the blue. This was years of therapy coming into it to ask this question, to have this kind of conscious ask of this question. Is this making me happy? And the students did, the research, learning about it did, but everything else just was a tsunami that drowned it all. And I walked away. And I was like, no, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm still within higher education. I still work at Durham, but from the management professional services side, because that's, my skills are still relevant there. But I'm not lecturing anymore. I'm not in that academic sphere. And I can tell you what, George, there's a normal amount of stress. There's nothing baseline anxiety about it. I can go in at 9 o'clock. I leave at 5. My work doesn't follow me about. I'm not playing. Who I talk to has no impact as to who will talk to me or my career progression, essentially. It's such a relief. And I remember starting this job, I was like, oh my God, what is that? It's the lightness, because there's no anxiety, or the anxiety is significantly reduced. There's no stress about it all. And I was like, how have I coped for 10 years feeling like this as a baseline, in survival mode for a baseline for 10 years? And there are others, who say they feel the same. And, I've got friends, where I acknowledge I've had those academic roles, and I'm fortunate that I've had them, and they've had a few postdocs and stuff, and they've been interspersed with years of other roles and stuff like that. And they're still striving for the academic goal, the academic dream. And it's like, part of me is like, you need to ask yourself, is this making you happy? Is this making you stressed and anxious? And if it is it worth it? And if the answer for that person is it's worth it, albeit to them, go for it. But if it's not, then you've got to ask yourself what's going on, because for me, it wasn't worth it. For me, I wanted it. I looked back and I was like, this has destroyed relationships. This has tainted friendships. This has, whatever. But still, the friends who I thought, the last stab in the gut kind of thing, was friends who I thought would remain friends, even though I wasn't an academic anymore. That was it. It's changed now. That our relationship has changed. That I don't talk to them as frequently. I see them, and rather that we're on campus where we'd have a good 5-minute chat and catch up about life, now it's just a hello, or Andy's professional services now, or Andy's management now. And it's just like, dude, I've been to your house for a barbecue and we've talked about loads of stuff. You don't need to talk to me in that tone, that kind of stuff. It's still that you're in on your out mentality we discussed before. That is, in many respects, a defining thing about academia. If you don't have the right accent, if you don't come from the right background or the right credentials, if you don't have the right research group, if you've not had the right grades, if you've not got the right supervisor, that kind of stuff, if it's not the right time, then you can find yourself out when you need to be in. And I know that's not unique to higher education. That's unique to that's probably shared across a lot of workplaces, but it seems very nuanced and very embedded and very prevalent and part of the foundation of academia. And it's not, it's not just me. I know friends who have tossed it in. A professor of mine, great professor, truly inspirational. George, one of those professors, when they speak, you're just like, I am hanging on every word. Tell me what it is. And I thought, that kind of stuff. They went through it. They reached the full professorial level. So you think their job is secure. They've made it to the top of the ivory tower, that kind of thing. Retired, left, just quit to become a massage therapist.
Wow, that is a fork in the road there, isn't it? Yeah,
It is. I was like, what? I was like, what the hell? Because this person could have been like a VC, one of those people I talked about, goes through and maybe changes it. And they were just saying, it's too stressful. No, I'm not dealing with this. I want a peaceful life. I'm impacting. It's impacting my relationships, impacting my life. I don't want to deal with it. I can earn a good living doing, sports massages and all the rest. And I was like, you know what? Fair. Do it, go for it. But so it's not just like from the PhD onwards. That tells me it's endemic throughout every layer of academia.
Yeah. Permeates the entire thing.
Yeah, and I dip my hat, I bow, and I acknowledge those who can cope with that, those who do it and succeed on it. One, they've probably buried a lot of bodies somewhere, or they've ignored a lot of things. But good on them. I respect to them. But those who can't, those who are struggling and think this is the only way, I'm here to say it's not the only way. It's not just you. Others have done it, and you can walk away. That might need a bit of pre-planning. You don't have to put yourself through that. But academia was, for me, this bright light. I thought it would be this great thing. And for a brief minute, it was, George, and it was glorious. I remember helping students, and that's the glory of it. That's what I focus on now. But it's very rare that is the case now. And it is what it is. And my depression, my anxiety, my stress since leaving my academics jobs, I've just dropped. They've gone. Well, they're not gone. They're never probably going to be gone, but the level that they're at has just flatlined. To an extent, it's become far more manageable, far more easier to recognize and to talk about and to understand and to
probably processing your traumas rather than living them.
Yeah, exactly, day to day. And it's there are very few things I can hold my hand up and say that was a good decision that I made. Anyone who knows me, yourself included, will be like, Andy, when have you ever made a good decision? But it's like that was to leave, to have that honest conversation with myself and the partner of my time, to say that was one of the best decisions I've made in my life, because I could not have gone on in many different ways on that. And for those who want to go down the PhD route, just if anything, whether you have neurodiverse kind of requirements and stuff like that, the university will accommodate that. They'll find a way to accommodate of that, I'm confident. And if you're just starting out, you'll probably be in a better position than George was, or than I was, or that someone is now. But know that you're not going to be alone in feeling this stress, that it is not dirty to talk about it. You can talk about it. You should talk about it. It should be a conversation to be had. And I am so angry at times that was never said to me going through PhD and going through my academic life, that we can talk about it. It was always that dirty little secret that no one mentioned. And it's like, no, it's time to talk about it now. You're not going to be alone. It will be stressful. There are ways to manage that stress, but you always have, as with everything in life, you've got to balance it out to see, are the cost worth the outputs here? And sometimes they are. Some people it is, because we're all individuals and we're all different. But for me, after 10 years, no, the scales couldn't balance anymore.
I mean, you leaving is loss, not the other way around. And I think, it's a story like yours that it could be echoed most likely. And I think disciplines like archaeology would benefit greatly from the type of person that may suffer with anxiety. So, I don't really know what to say, Andy. It's sad, but I'm glad that you've come on here and shared that experience. And I think, just quickly, I just want to say that, one thing that always strikes me after conversations like these is how many neurodivergent people spend years believing they are the problem, as I did, as you did.
Yeah.
It's not because they lack intelligence or curiosity or ability, or because it is because they're trying to succeed within systems that often recognize only certain ways of learning or demonstrating knowledge. And there is a hierarchy there. And unfortunately, human nature is, and it isn't, as you referenced, it's not just academia, but in academia, which is what we're talking about, you often get these processes that mean that certain people are going to struggle or stress is going to be induced. And so the reality is that a lot of neurodivergent people can and do succeed in academia. Some of my, I'm certain most, if not all of my favourite lecturers and archaeologists are somewhere on the spectrum, and most of them are leaders in their field. I mean, Duncan Garrow mentioned a few episodes back that he believes that neurodiversity plays a massive part in archaeology for that reason. And whether you're academic or not, staying in academia is one path, but leaving academia isn't failure. Archaeology is for everyone, in spite of what some outdated views might insist. Learning, teaching, digging up dirt and cleaning artifacts, it's all essential work. And what matters is recognizing that intelligence comes in many forms as well, and it's struggling with things like concentration, organization, reading, maths, deadlines, or mental health. It doesn't make somebody less capable. And if academia truly values knowledge, then it should also value the many different kinds of minds that help create it.
Hands down, the best students I've had may not necessarily be the most academically intelligent, shall we say, use that term, but have been the most emotionally intelligent and have been able to see the nuance within, a species of behavior far more than someone who can pick something up rote from a book or from a paper. And they're the joys. Yeah. You get the interesting conversations with them. You get the human perspective of it, which is what archaeology is, to just understand our own humanity, our own humanness, really. And if we just have, the cloistered scholar, then we're only going to get the cloistered scholar perspective of humanity, and we that's going to be a disservice to our history, ourselves, our ancestors, that kind of stuff. It's weird. I just want to, if you say, this is the odd thing about all this, because my time in academia was a roller coaster, and it features, as we talked about, depression, anxiety, and stress, and all the rest. But here's the thing, George. If you were to ask me, would you do that again? Hands down. And I guess that answers the question as, was it worth it? Because through my life in academia and archaeology, I've met yourself, I've met friends like Chris, and I've met, a range of other people that connect me across this world. I've been to places that I thought a boy from Lee would never, ever go. I've held a 500,000-year hand axe in my hand, connected me directly with an individual. I've held bones, I've helped crime scenes, I've helped, this, that, and the other. There have been many highs, and I'm very privileged to have had this journey, and I recognize that privilege. I think many academics don't recognize that privilege at times, or they take it for granted. But amongst all the stress that it's given me, I would be hard-pressed, George, to say I wouldn't do it again, because it has opened up my life and my world, and it has made me who I am today. And I think that is the value of not just academia, but archaeology within that subset, to take you to these places, to give you that wider expanse of humanity and that experience. And if we just limit it, to the academic intelligence, the cloistered scholars, again, like I say, we do that a disservice. We need to be more open, as you've advocated there, to different intelligences, to different wisdoms, to different perspectives and approaches, and archaeology is primed for that. It was started by white men in tweed, wasn't it? And now it's advocated by a variety of different people, approached in a variety of different ways. It has probably evolved maybe the fastest of maybe most academic fields in that sense, in terms of representation. You look at a volunteer archaeological dig, you'll see the vast diversity of humanity there really these days. It has been a privilege, it has been a joy, and I think that is just because of everything that archaeology has given. If I was doing physics, for example, I would have probably left academia far sooner.
Yeah, okay.
But archaeology was anthropology, that kind of stuff was the key thing probably for me that allowed that. It's that uniqueness to open up, to understand. I don't think I could have had the same in history, physics, chemistry, biology, a straight subjects that didn't have that kind of, not to say, because my experience with them is very minimal, not to say that they're not like archaeology in that respect, but my perception of it is archaeology is better in that openness and that willingness to learn and adapt.
Good. And I agree. And I think I just want to make the point, I'm very conscious of time, we've got to wrap it up, but I do just want to say that from my own perspective, and I'm sure Andy will echo this, that when you leave academia, you don't have to leave archaeology. You can still volunteer, you can still enjoy it. If you've still got that passion for it, it's still there. It's on the TV, it's online. You can still get hold of journals. It's still there, and it's still the wonderful field that we all hope it is.
Oh, it is.
It is, yeah.
And I volunteer. I still volunteer. I get my trowel out. I still volunteer. I live in the northeast now. There's a lot of Roman stuff around here that they need help with. And I would advocate anyone listening who, if you're looking at archaeology as a hobby, or you're thinking about archaeology as a career or for going into university, find a local dig. Go for it and have a try, and that kind of stuff, because you will not meet a better type of person than an archaeologist. Truly.
I agree.
They will frustrate you. They will make you laugh. They will make you think. They will rid you of any highfalutin kind of connotations that you may have in your head. They will speak to you down to earth on their level, but they will teach you, and they will guide you, and they will hold your hand on your way, and they will never rush you forward. They will always bring you at your pace. The best people I know are archaeologists, and that is true. And just go on a dig, go on a volunteer stuff, or just watch them. If you can, go on, find one and just watch them, because no doubt if you're just watching there behind the tape to prevent you going on the site, someone will go, do you want to come in? Do you want to have a look? Because that's who we are. We open you up to it. We're not restrictive in that sense.
No, that's the thing, isn't it? It's our special interest, it's our obsessions, and we want to share it with everybody. But anyway, Andy, thank you so much for coming on and being willing to share such personal experiences today. Thank you, mate. I really do appreciate it, and I'm sure there'll be some people listening who are very grateful for you coming on.
No, anytime. It's my pleasure. Thank you, George.
All right, Andy. Well, thank you everyone else for listening, and until next time, remember that there is more than one way to learn, and more than one way to think, and more than one way to be brilliant. Okay, see you guys soon.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. The Archaeology Podcast Network's chief editor is Rachel Roden. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy. Our social media and newsletter coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht. The APN was founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle on December 1st, 2014. We're supported by our amazing podcast hosts, many volunteers, and listeners like you. Check out membership at www.archpodnet.com/members.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.